In the first part of a Farmers Weekly series looking into the truth about different aspects of farming, I've travelled to West Sussex to meet dairy farmer Tim Gue to discuss the pros and cons of dredging rivers.
I'm Tim Gue. We farm at Steyning, just here alongside the Ada, and we farm probably 180 acres of land that's on the floodplain. It's all river meadows, traditionally is a river floodplain, that's what it is. When we came here 35 years ago, the river was in a really good state, and the water moved very quickly from here, the 4 miles or so it is, to the coast. Now, nothing's been done with the river in that period. The capacity of the river is probably only half as much as it was in those days. We've had an awful lot of building in the area in the meantime, so an awful lot of water hitting the river much faster. And we all know what's happened with climate change and the much wetter winters, the much bigger rainfall events that we've been getting mean that these flood meadows are at their limit. We used to get this area flooded maybe once a year, sometimes in a really bad year twice, many years not at all. Last year it was completely underwater for 4 months of the winter. And the state of the grassland after that, we didn't get any grass growth really until the middle of July. This year we've already been completely under for probably 6 weeks. It's not getting any better.
So Farmers Weekly has spoken to the Environment Agency, and they tell us that dredging is not the solution in all instances. However, they do say in certain areas or on certain parts of rivers it can be a solution. How about this river behind me here?
Yeah, I think it would be completely appropriate to do some dredging here. If we could get the river back to the state it was in when it was well maintained 40 years ago, I'm sure that the floodplain would work much better, not just for people, because there are lots of properties that are quite vulnerable downstream, but also for the people upstream as well, because we're holding their water back, but also for the environment. I mean, these floodplains, these grasslands, used to be teeming with insect life. Well, when it's been underwater for 4 months, there was practically nothing last summer at all. They take a long time to recover.
I've travelled to Winald Moors Nature Reserve, which is just outside Winchester, and it provides flood storage for the city. And I'm here to meet Ali Morse from the Wildlife Trusts to get her view on flood alleviation.
Well, I think there's a good amount of evidence that says that dredging, where it improves conveyance, can have a beneficial effect in managing flood risk. But equally, there are situations in which it isn't beneficial or it's potentially even harmful. So wherever there is a downstream pinch point that restricts conveyance, like a bridge or even a town, then dredging upstream of that isn't going to have any benefit. And in terms of the harms that dredging can cause, it can destabilise riverbanks and contribute to erosion. It can remove wildlife habitat. It can have an effect on conveyance year-round, so you can see lower water levels in summer than you'd otherwise expect, and that can cause problems with soil moisture and with ability to irrigate. And it can also channel floodwaters downstream and therefore increase flood risk in other areas. So it is about using the right technique in the right place. Dredging does certainly have a place, but it needs to be undertaken as part of an agreed strategy for managing flood risk across a catchment, rather than in isolation for the benefit of an individual farm or field. Having a variety of habitats, of structures across our river systems is important for their natural functionality, for their biodiversity, and for the way that they convey water. So we don't need to undertake dredging or channel maintenance absolutely everywhere to get the best impacts for flood risk management. And we're increasingly hearing about research that's building the evidence base for the value of soils. So it's not just about what river channels can do in terms of conveyance, it's about the opportunity to hold water across the whole landscape. We're hearing evidence of the volumes of water that soils can hold or can infiltrate if they're in good condition, particularly through regenerative agriculture. But a lot of our soils across the landscape are compacted, they're degraded, and so at the moment they're channeling water downstream to our river systems, and there's just a greater volume of water than our systems can cope with. So we need to look to things like the Environmental Land Management Scheme to look at how we can manage soils across the catchment, and also how we can install features that will help us manage flood risk in order to make the best opportunities of the funding that's out there.
Farmers have welcomed the government pledge for an additional £75 million of funding for internal drainage boards in order to carry out river maintenance works around prime agricultural land. However, there now needs to be a more collaborative approach between farmers and stakeholders and people within the industry and the Environment Agency in order to ensure that more regular maintenance is carried out on our rivers to stop prime agricultural land from flooding.